Saline has announced candidacy for the LD6 House. He interned for the Republican National Committee in Washington, D.C., and was active in the BYU College Republican Club. He has worked as a deputy public defender for Navajo County and has served as a prosecutor for the town of Springerville. In 2014, Jon started his own law firm, and as a small business owner, Saline, oh, they spelled your name wrong in this too. What is going on here? Good grief. And as a small business owner, he ran for and was elected to the Snowflake Taylor Chamber of Commerce Executive Board, where he eventually made vice president. In this capacity, he was able to create a scholarship for recent high school graduates, which was his platform. Saline also initiated the White Mountain Wills for Warriors, which is an effort to provide wills and estate planning for local veterans at no cost. So I am introducing to you Jon, Jon, Saline, Saline, because it seems to be misprinted. So here's Jon.
Thank you, Shirley. I tell you guys.
Okay, I'll sit over here. Why don't you come over here?
Okay, wherever you want me.
Yeah, I was just getting the wiring out of the way here.
You are very lucky here to have people like Shirley helping you. Let me tell you what. I live in Navajo County. I ran for justice of the peace up there, and getting any help from any organization up there was really difficult. They were just not organized like you are, and I appreciate that. You guys are a great benefit to the district, a benefit to Northern Arizona, so thank you. I was down in Cottonwood just this morning with Mike Shaw from the Republican AZ GOP. Just a couple things I wanted to mention from his little discussion. He was talking a little bit about registrations, where we're at in terms of registering new voters, and he had some bad news and some good news. Bad news, in Maricopa County, we're getting beat by the Democrats by about 1,000 registrations right now.
Because they're out doing the footwork, gang.
Good news, everywhere outside of Maricopa County, we're up by 4,000 registrations. So we're beating them everywhere else, which is due in part to people like you all over rural Arizona stepping out and helping our neighbors get registered. And that's a good thing. We need to push that a little bit more, I think. So, a little bit about me. I know I've been here a couple times, and this might be repeat information for all of you, but my name's Jon Saline. I live in Snowflake, Arizona. I was raised in Taylor, Arizona, on a little family farm. I got all my underwear bright red in the mud that flows through the Silver Creek. It was a wonderful childhood for me. You know, growing up as a country boy, gave me a lot of life lessons about how to work hard, what is it to be honest, have integrity, those kind of things. I'm a fifth generation Arizonan. I consider myself to be a constitutional conservative. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I am an attorney. I've been practicing for about 8.5 years. It's not terribly long, I suppose, but mostly criminal defense is what I do. I do estate planning as well, and some civil litigation. I'm kind of like a trial attorney. When I went to law school, I was afraid of going into court, but when I got out, I got pushed in that direction, and I just love it. It's fun to do. My platform, if you haven't, one of my cards, my platform is to defend life, liberty, and our Northern Arizona rural values. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those sections tonight, because I think each of those things is under attack. And in this election, we're going to be even more under attack in 2020. It just seems like every place and every entity that could come and try and attack those things that we hold dear is rearing its head, and all kind of joining forces. So we need to join forces together and fight the darkness that we see in front of us. So, a couple of things, as an attorney, my whole world at work kind of revolves around statutes and case law, right? And then we throw facts in there sometimes. But that's where we start. And I think that's a good place to start. I think as citizens, the first place we like to start is what? The Constitution of the United States of America, right? That is the bedrock law of the land. And all of the founders said, if we have any other laws that are made that are afoul of that or don't comport or comply with the Constitution, they're null, they're void, we should throw them out, right? And I think some people have forgotten that fact, but that's a thing for another day. But when it comes to life, we have the Declaration of Independence, and that is that document where the founders first identified a fact that we have, as a human race, have not identified until they did, in my view. And that is, we have rights that are given to us by our Creator. They're not given to us by some king, by some strong man, by any government, right? And so they identified that because they were facing government and a king that was just usurping all of their resources and just pushing them around as they wanted to. So what is the first thing that they identified they believed they had a right to?
Free speech.
Life, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are the three things that they identify in the Declaration of Independence that they wanted to provide for themselves and their posterity. And they're doing that in the face of this oppressive government. When they did that, they were considered traitors for what they did. So, life, right? In my view, and one of the reasons that I'm running is I believe strongly, as I believe a lot or most of you believe, every life is precious, right? We're all, regardless of race, creed, religion, whatever we use to differentiate ourselves, we are all children of our Heavenly Father with a divine, in my view, divine potential. How do you measure that potential when you have an unborn child? We can't, right? To give you an example, I have a twin brother. I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was here. I have a twin brother. His name's Lon, actually, Lon.
Okay.
And yeah, that's right. He stands about this tall, right? So I'm kind of upset about him being that tall. I have been forever. But the reason that is, I think, is because back in 1980, they didn't have any of these, what do you call them? Oh,
DNA testing?
No. Ultrasounds, right?
Right.
They were just coming out, and my mom was a little afraid of them, so she never got one. So she's there at the doctor, and she's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And the doctor's like, something's wrong here. You need to stop eating. So she did. So anyways, the day of our birth comes, and I decided that, this is getting too cramped, so I just kind of kicked my brother out, and up in Flagstaff where I was born. And so they delivered my brother, and then the doctor says to my mom, uh-oh, we're not done here. So eventually I was born, and great from there on out, in my view. The point of that story is this: at any point when the doctor said, "We're not done here," my mom could have said, I didn't sign up for two. I only signed up for one." And she could have got rid of me or whatever. She didn't understand. She did understand and realize every life has potential, no matter how it gets here, right? And so that's part of the platform, I think, of the Republican Party, to be conservative. You believe in the value and the life of everyone else. That right to life is what some people define as a negative or a right. What I mean by that is, it's a right that I have that I don't have to do anything to exercise. Right? Yeah. The only thing I have to do is maintain my duty not to cross over your right to life. In other words, I have the right to life, but it is attached to a duty not to kill you, right? And that's how we function as a society. And that's, all of those inalienable rights are negative rights that we keep, and we don't have to really do anything to exercise them other than just live the way that we want to live. Some people will call other rights that are, I would consider positive rights, and I'll give you an example, and I'll tell you why they don't think they really fit. I have a right to health care. No, because the answer is no, because that right means I have a right to something that you have, right? You have my health care, doctor. I have a right to have that for free. No, it doesn't work that way. And I think the founders realized that when they created this establishment of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that were the case, we could all say, okay, government, I have a right to the Second Amendment. I want you to buy me a shotgun. Right?
Okay, that's good.
It's kind of the same logic. But that's not how it works. So, when it comes to life, we defend life at every stage. Right? We defend life on the preborn side. We defend life when the child is born. And today, that is under attack heavily. New York, Virginia, they've decided, if the mom doesn't want this baby that is sitting in front of us breathing, we'll just make it comfortable and let it die. Right? Well, I want to read you just a quick thing. This is a statute. And there are a lot of statutes like this one. This is the definition of second-degree murder. Okay, I deal in criminal code all day long, so this is where I'm kind of the most comfortable. But let me just read a couple things in here, okay? Second-degree murder, ARS 131104. A person commits second-degree murder if without premeditation, the person intentionally causes the death of another person. This is the important part. Including an unborn child. Or as a result of intentionally causing the death of another person causes the death of an unborn child. So that's the first section. So Arizona has a rule, right? And it's the same for first degree murder, for manslaughter, for negligent homicide. They're all the same with this kind of structure. The rule is every life has value, right? Including the unborn child. That's the rule. So now we have created in the statute, I'll read it in just a second, there is an exception to that rule that deals with abortion. Okay, so it says, an offense under this section applies to an unborn child in the womb at any stage of its development. A person may not be prosecuted under this section if any of the following applies. And it goes through essentially saying a doctor or a mother in an abortion situation. But my point is simply this. We already, as a society, at least in Arizona, already view the value of that life. And it's our job to uphold that as conservatives because we can see on their face that the Democrats do not care about that and they don't want to preserve it. So we care about life and we want to continue those. Second thing is liberty, and I have a couple points quickly for that. One of the biggest pushes that we have lately is pushing against our rights to parent our children. So you can look to DCS perhaps to talk about that, but you can look mostly to education. Our statutes, and frankly the Supreme Court has said, parents have a fundamental right to parent their children without government intrusion. That is the standard from the United States Supreme Court. The reason they have to identify it is because it's frankly not in the Constitution. But they've grabbed that right and they've said this right is the same as those rights. Right? So it's a fundamental, that's what the word fundamental means. Fundamental right to that. Kind of like our fundamental right to privacy, which is not named in the Constitution. It is in Arizona's, but not the U.S. Constitution. But we have those rights that they have kind of grabbed and thrown in the mix. That is under attack today, right? We have schools that are trying to say, we want to teach your kids one way or the other way, and we don't care what you, the parent, think about that. We have rules that people are trying to push to say you can't decide where your child is taught. And so, how many of you in here are parents? Grandparents? Great-grandparents? I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and they right now have 2 great-grandparents that are living and a great-great that is alive, which is amazing because both my grandparents have moved on to the next phase. But it matters for everyone, right? That liberty that the founders have established for us, they said in that document, this is for us and our posterity, right? So when we're talking about teaching our children, we have the right and the liberty to teach them what we want to teach them. Government coming in with classes in schools is only to help us in that goal. So my view, and I think I'm aligned with a lot of the other candidates that are running in this election on the Republican side, is we need more school choice. Arizona's good about that. They're trying to knock it down. We need that school choice. It's very important. A lot of people point to public education as a reason or a way to justify socialism. If you think about it, they say, well, you do believe in socialism, you just don't know it, right? Because you like public schools, and that's a socialism effort. And the answer to that is no, it's not. It's capitalist in nature, because in Arizona you can choose to go to a public school or a charter school, or you can go to a private school or online school, whatever the parent thinks is best, right? That's how it should be. If you think about it, back 100 years ago, where did the teachers come from?
The community.
Right, or they came to the community as a single teacher, and they were housed in people's houses, and the community came together and helped support the teacher, right? There was no Department of Education, there was nothing like that. And I don't know that we'll ever get back to that, but that, I think, was a good idea, a good place to be, because then the parents are right on board with what's happening in the classroom. Now, I really appreciate what Shirley said about talking about the town council and things like that, because in my line of work, the most real laws, concrete laws that we have are the ones that affect us the most directly, right? So town councils, those kind of things. I would take it a step further and say, the judge sitting in front of you trying to give you instructions or orders, that law is the most relevant to you at that time. But it plays the same way for local politics. That's what my point is. And local politics is where we can make a big dent in education. We need to be active in our school boards and push our issues there. What are the issues we have? Well, Sylvia was here 2-3 weeks ago, something like that, and she gave a speech about some of the education that's being pushed today. I will tell you, I have another statute here that I wanted to read to you. This is ARS 133506, and it says, "It is unlawful for any person with knowledge of the character of the item involved to recklessly furnish, present, provide, make available, give, lend, show, advertise, or distribute to minors any item that is harmful to minors." Well, that's vague. What does that mean, right? It doesn't mean anything until we define that term. So the definitions for that section say, harmful to minors means that quality of any description or representation in whatever form of nudity, sexual activity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse, right? So it defines those terms. So last time Sylvia was here, she was holding up a book that you could look at if you wanted to. I went and I looked all through that. If I took that book and I handed it to a juvenile or a minor, I could be responsible for this crime. And it says This is a class 4 felony. That's the same as possessing methamphetamine, to give you an idea of how serious the legislature thinks it is. So that's the kind of material that they have brought from California, trying to push on our students at younger and younger and younger ages. And Sylvia would tell you they are going to, if they take over the House of Representatives, they are going to push that all day long. They're also going to push, Walt Blackman would tell you, I've heard him do it before, 5 abortion bills, including an infanticide bill, that they have ready to go for next session or when they get in power. That's why those kind of overarching, ambiguous issues apply to us, right? Right now we're sitting at 31-29 in terms of 31 House Representatives, 29 House Democrats down in Phoenix. And if we lose a seat, that could flip, right? Right now, Walt, I heard him the other day complain that they have to have every representative there at every vote, because if they don't, they either tie or lose. And that is scary when you think about these bills that they're bringing up. So that's why I'm here. One of the reasons I'm here, Walt, I joked with him. I said, Walt, you talked me into running before you gave me all the information.
Yeah.
Because it's an uphill battle. We have Art Babbitt, Coral Evans. They have a lot of name recognition that I frankly don't have, and I have to recognize that. What that means is I got to build a grassroots network of friends and people that want to support me. You're going to see a lot of money coming in this race from every side, and a lot of money is going to come from Planned Parenthood. It already has started for Coral. In the past, she's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood in the past, and I'm sure it will continue on. So we have a fight there. Art is a heavy Bernie Sanders supporter. What that means realistically for us is that he sides with socialistic ideals, which is another thing that we're trying to fight. When it comes to liberty, right, socialism is kind of antithetical to liberty. It's against it, and our youth don't understand that. When I was in Cottonwood this morning, we were at the VFW, and sad to say, this is the first time I've ever been in a VFW building, and it was amazing to me, because all around the room, they had so many like little mannequins with these uniforms of every type lining the walls. And I had to say to him, like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. These people sacrifice so much for us. You know, in every branch of the government, of the military, they have made such a huge sacrifice, and they've handed it to their kids. And our kids have kind of just said, you know, they've kind of given up on the ideal of freedom and independence and personal responsibility, those values that we hold as Northern Arizona rural people. I think a lot of our youth, in fact, I heard a statistic that 50% of millennials believe that socialism is better than capitalism. So I have a plan, at least for my own kids. You could try this with your grandkids. So you take $10 and you tell your kid, you go and do this chore and I'll give you $10. They do the chore, you give them the $10. And then you say, hang on just a second. Then you take 7 back and you give it to the neighbor kid that didn't do anything. And they'll be capitalists for life. But that's what we're kind of up against, is just this roadblock of they haven't been taught our history and of the value of liberty. They just don't have it. And they think it's not cool to talk about that stuff. You know, and so one of the reasons that I'm running is I want to bridge that gap in the Republican Party and in general between the generation that understands this stuff and realizes and appreciates it in the next generation. If we don't do that, we're lost, we're done. Last thing I want to talk about, because I know my time is short, in terms of liberty, there's been a lot of issue lately regarding the Second Amendment. I want you to know, Any issue on infringing the Second Amendment is a non-starter for me. I've dealt with enough of people getting their rights just trampled. Every time I go into a case, a criminal case, I have a defendant that's saying, but the police didn't do this right. They searched my house with no reason, right? And so I file a motion that says, they did this wrong, this is an illegal search, or whatever. And what does the state do? What does the government do? Well, instead of looking at it rationally, and they fight me on it. They try and nitpick why what they did is not that bad. You don't think that's going to happen when these red flag laws come? I guarantee you it will. Due process is a bedrock foundation principle that we have to maintain. If we don't maintain that, everything goes away. If we don't maintain the right to under the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, every other right that we have identified in the Bill of Rights falls away. Right? They all rely on that one. So I'm a very strong proponent of that. I know Walt Blackman is. I haven't really talked to Sylvia or Bob about those, but I suspect they're the same. We got to stand strong for those, and I will. I appreciate your vote. I appreciate all of you coming out here. It's an amazing ideal that we have and that we're fighting for, and we need to pass that on. We need to fight for it, and I appreciate you being here. So, God bless America. God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, John, hold on to that because we're going to do Q&A. Okay, the rules for our Q&A, you know, we've got one hand up already, so you can't ask a question
Which
unless
one
you...
didn't you see?
Huh?
Which hand didn't you see?
I saw...
You didn't see this one, huh?
I didn't see Bill. You can't always be first. Okay. Phyllis has the first question, and if I turned it on, and we alternate, John. So we do this side of the room, then we do that side, then back and forth and back and forth.
Okay, so I know
Okay?
what to do then.
So you know where
Turn and pivot, right?
where to swivel to, yes. Okay, go ahead, Phyllis.
I have actually two questions. The first one is, could you define infanticide and the difference between second-degree murder?
Great question. Infanticide, in my view, in terms of what I'm talking about, are the laws where they say we're going to give birth to this child. It can stand on its own, not stand, lie on its own. It's a living, separate entity from its mother, and we're going to just kill it. We're going to let it die. We're going to make it comfortable, they say, and then we're just going to let it. We're not going to feed it, anything like that. I don't know how that fits into this secondary murder, because let me read our abortion, what I would consider the exception to the rule. An offense under this section applies to an unborn child in the womb at any stage of development. The person may not be prosecuted under this section if any of the following applies. The person was performing an abortion for which the consent of the pregnant woman or a person authorized by law to act on the pregnant woman's behalf has been obtained, for which the consent was implied or authorized by law. A person was performing medical treatment on the pregnant woman or the pregnant woman's unborn child. The person was the unborn child's mother. Interesting, right? Because that says it seems to imply that a mother could kill her own unborn child, at my reading of that. But that's what I think. So I think you would have an argument to be made that it is murder, and I would say it is murder, in my view. So. Second question?
Yes. My second question is, why did you choose to become a defense attorney instead of a prosecutor? I worked in Rick Romley's office for 10 years. Why?
Thank you. Great question. So I have been a prosecutor before. I was the prosecutor for the city of Springerville. So I handled minor offenses and misdemeanors in that court. So I didn't prosecute felonies. When I first came out of law school, I applied at the Navajo County Prosecutor's Office, and they hired someone else. So I just didn't move into that direction. So I started at a firm doing the defense. I think really your underlying question, if I might be so bold, is to say, how can you feel comfortable defending criminals, right? That that have broken the law? And my answer to that question is, that is what the Constitution requires. If we treat them lower than an individual just because of an act they've committed, then we really are not fulfilling the role of the Constitution. The Constitution itself in Article, or the Sixth Amendment rather, says they have a right to have an attorney to come and defend them. Why would the founders put that in there? Why would they say the worst of the worst, the redcoats? Why do they get why do they get a defense attorney named John Adams? It's because we have to hold that ideal up, no matter who they are. We have to hold it up, because if we start dropping it for certain exceptions, then we lose it, and it loses its candor. Does that answer your question?
You ready?
Two very quick short. The first one is the numbers of R's and D's in the House is 3129.
Yeah, that's what they
Okay, I missed that, okay. Years ago, not many years ago, there was something called Red for Ed or Ed for Red, where these people who knew all the answers to something decided that students didn't need to go to school that day or those days, and unless they went to school and played video games, because the teachers weren't there that day. They're for ed, but they're not for teaching. They're for demonstrating. Tell me a little bit about, what do you, and briefly about that. Thank you.
Okay, so what is my position on the Red Ed for
Yes, yes.
Red for Ed and their striking and that kind of? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I most closely align with another group called Purple for Parents. The reason I do that is because
Not in my school.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, this has gone on, and of course, the social media, and parents aren't taking time
Right.
to tell them the facts of life.
And it comes down to this: parents have a right to parent their children, but tied to that right is a responsibility to do so. Right? They have to stand up and do it, and they have to teach them what's right and wrong, and they're getting it. You have a question?
Kathy.
A statement. I'm a senior citizen, but I do have children in the public school system in Payson. And a few years ago, when it was maybe 5, they had a mandatory sex education something for the girls, but the boys did not have to attend. And I was one of those parents going, if it's mandatory, to me mandatory means everyone, not a select group. And then the other part was when you mentioned the Red for Ed. We too were affected. There were no teachers, so there was no school. And we received an email telling us that we were supposed to have our children make up that time on a Saturday because there were so many days that are required of school. So, it's just my statement.
Yeah, thank you. I had a parent in Snowflake, when we had a meeting talking about this, say that 20 years ago in Snowflake, the teachers in the second grade the school had brought in this person to train the kids, and this person pulled the kids away from the teachers into a separate classroom and taught them essentially, this is what you need to do if someone tries to touch you in an inappropriate way, which is, it's good for them to have that information, I guess, at that young age, but they didn't tell the teachers that's what they were teaching them. And so the parent, the kid came home and said, well, Mom, this is what we learned at school today. And she's livid. Who gives you the right to decide when we talk about, when I teach my child about this, so it was, even back then, it was kind of starting to come, and it's even worse today. So.
You're talking to the choir here.
I know.
Okay, which is great. So when you get down to the legislature, and you have a bunch of very emotional, radical people that you're dealing with, now what do you do? I don't know if there's some way to change any of their mind, but what will be your approach? I mean, hopefully we'll be in the majority and that won't be a big issue, but anyhow.
Good question. So I think the easiest way to answer that is to say I deal with highly emotional, mostly illogical clients as criminal defense clients all the time. And they usually are wrong about their assertions of, these are my rights, you know. So I'm pretty well acquainted with how to deal with these people that I'm trying to help, but they're not, you know, all there, or they're not getting what we're talking about. I think that will come in very handy for me when I'm trying to deal with lobbyists or with the other side of the aisle. You just have to be rational and level-headed with them.
Okay. Johnny is here next, and then we've got Don, and then Bill, and then Glenn.
Okay, if this sex educational book is prima facie potentially damaging to the youth, right? Under that fourth, the other law,
Right.
What's preventing anybody from filing an injunction based on the fact that this is prima facie illegal?
So, I guess the first answer to that question is, when they started about a month and a half ago with the Kathy Hoffman, and Sylvia talked about this when she was here. They had a big Arizona school board meeting about it, and she was trying to install this as a regulation under her authority as this superintendent. Not a legislative statute, but a regulation or a rule. And that's where Purple for Parents is a group that just kind of flooded that meeting, and Sylvia Allen and Walter Blackman were all there, and they were saying, we're not going to let you do this. They had 75 parents there complaining about it, and they kind of headed it off there because they were going to vote on it to instill it and start it in all the districts in Arizona, and they just abandoned that, which was a big win for parents. So, but they're going to keep throwing it at us until they can try and get it. So we got to just fight it. The best place to fight it, frankly, in my view, is to try and fight it at the local school board level as well. I'm sure Payson has teachers that are not on board with that. They've got to. I know Snowflake does, because I know a lot of the teachers. There's got to be someone to stand up and say, it's not the role of government.
Okay, Pete has a...
Pete Alshire with the Payson Roundup. But, so can you be specific? You talked about an infanticide bill, essentially saying that there's a bill waiting to be introduced and suggesting maybe one is already in law somewhere, which would make it legal to kill or deny life-saving treatment to an already born infant. Was that in cases where they had,
That's correct.
profound brain damage, or they were not, but if you can be specific and give me the example.
Right.
So
So I guess the first example I would give you is New York passed a law that said if we have a botched abortion and the child survives, then we're going to make the child comfortable and we're going to let the mother decide what she wants to do with the child. And that happens more often than you'd think. Anecdotally, there's a lot of examples on Facebook of people that say, my mom had a botched abortion and here I am. So that, Virginia has a similar law they passed this past year. So those are the two examples. In Arizona, I guess I'd refer you to Walt Blackman, who could give you the bill number. But they already ran a bill that never got out of committee to do that. The Republicans were successful at stopping that. And those are the things I'm pointing at when I say that.
Bill?
I don't have the number for you. If you give me your card, I'll try and find it for you if you want.
Okay, Bill, Don,
One of the things that I've noticed, this thing about sex education, she pointed out that you're preaching to the choir, and I'll agree with that. That doesn't mean for you to stop. I'm not complaining. But I am saying that the people in this room, the people who are generally conservative, I think do a fairly good job of teaching their kids the right way to deal with sexual issues and the fact that their hormones are raging from the time they're about 12 years old. On the other hand, back in the 50s and 60s, parents were not teaching their kids these things. We got sex education in the schools, and at that time, maybe not now, but at that time, the education was fairly age-specific, age-appropriate. As a result, the number of unwanted pregnancies in young people have been declining steadily for the last 10 years. And I consider this to be the direct result of sex education in the schools. I think now it's being pushed too far, as you've been pointing out. But that is the value of it, because an awful lot of parents, and apparently people in general in this country, are absolutely terrified of sex.
Right, and it's a good point. I think it's a good point to clarify. Sex education is not a bad thing, right, if it's in certain parameters. But it's when we talk about this, it's what we call comprehensive sex education that is from 12th grade down to, first grade, kindergarten. And they have different levels of that. And so what I take issue with is this. Don't teach my first grader what anal sex is. Don't teach them all these strange things that people do it on your own time, whatever. But I'm the one that decides as the parent what my child learns at that young age about those things. Because I have my personal moral values. I'm not imposing on anyone else except my kid, right? Which is my right to do. As a parent, I have the fundamental right to parent my child without government intrusion. That's where I think conservatives can hold that line, to say parents are the ones that decide. Yes, some parents might say, that's a good idea to teach my first grader that. Let them do it if that's their role or their desire. I'm not here to step on their right. I'm here to say the government shouldn't be forcing them to do that at such a young age. And I think I've done some dependency work in the courts with dealing with DCS and removing children from homes and things like that. One of the things they look at, and they will really harp on a parent for, is providing or over-sexualizing young children, because they know they have the science behind them, that this can create psychological problems for the child. You see them, they start wetting the bed, they start abusing themselves at young age because they just don't understand what these things mean.
It needs to be age appropriate.
Age appropriate is okay, and I think it's good for this. When I was in high school, or junior high rather, in 8th grade, they taught us this is a boy, this is a girl, these are the parts they both have, this is how the parts fit together or go together in order to reproduce. Scientifically based, and I think that's good.
I'd say I drove a school bus carrying junior high school kids for 6 years after I retired. And the interesting thing I found just from overhearing conversations on the bus, those kids knew more about sex in junior high school than I knew when I learned how to vote.
When I was in 6th grade, I rode the bus, and we had it was in Taylor, and a big controversy broke out when there were some girls in my class that were the kind of the popular girls, and they had quote-unquote boyfriends in 6th grade. But they had decided to give their boyfriends a condom as a Christmas present when I was in 6th grade. Wow. They got in so much trouble, right? That because it was totally inappropriate. And we as a society have lost that,
Okay, we have Glenn.
Hey, Glenn.
I think it falls back to a lot of basic things like absentee ownership, absentee parenthood, absentee school board. I'm going to give you a good example, and everybody here knows about it. For 4 years, I complained about unqualified bus drivers here drinking, running stop signs, had a lot of videotapes, 85 mile an hour passing me going down the hill ride, on and on. In fact, 4 days before this lady was arrested for drunken driving here, I had a meeting with Tim Humphrey and a group of people and talked about it. Blow a stop sign.
Driving a school bus.
Yeah, blowing a stop sign on a freeway out there, 20 mile an hour. And I knew we were gonna get 25 or 30 kids killed there. And so, all of a sudden, a arrest came. All the school kids knew this lady was drinking for 3 months. At 7 o'clock in the morning, if you're drunk, you got a problem. You know? And they're not giving drug and alcohol tests, so they're not checking equipment. And so we've got absentee ownership. Now, we got one of the nicest newspapers I've ever seen, all about football games and catching fish in the park and all that. But you know what? We don't have a real good investigative reporter here. I'm talking about those days when Al Sitter and Don Bowles and a couple of them were working on things. You know, I put the state fair director in the penitentiary. 7 years. I put some people in the school down there in the penitentiary. If you get absentee ownership, I don't care if it's a house rental, the school board, it is not going to work, or their kids. You're off work all the time. You have to be there and show them the love and attention.
Let me add an anecdotal statistic for you for that. We've had 28 mass shootings. The most recent 28 mass shootings, 27 of them, the person that committed it came from a fatherless home. I'm not going to draw any real conclusions on that.
You don't have to. It's
But
there.
you can see the statistic on its
One
face.
other thing, we just had some of the city councilmen a couple of months ago try to take prayer out of city council. And one of them happened to be on the school board already, one of these absentee school board members. And I approached her after this has happened. Oh, we've got rid of her, she's arrested. No, that's not it. And what about who was ahead of that department? That was the husband of the financial director of the Payson City Council. Oh, he's gone, he quit. No, that's not it. You've got to go clean that up and let people know you've got into it. We need a good investigative reporter.
We love you, Peter.
Sure, she's next with the next question. Louise is next.
Just 1 second, Louise. Last thing I would say about that is, I think we can use as much prayer as we can get. We need God's help to fix some of these problems. So.
I'm going to tell you about an experience that I had, that what I saw, I wish I had never seen. I walk in Rumsey Park almost every day, and right at the swimming pool, there's a chain link fence. So I was walking this one day, and I happened to look over to the corner of the fence. There was a boy standing there. These look like high school kids, I'm not sure. And if this is what sex education is, it's really bad. He was standing against the fence with his pants down. The girl was on her knees giving him oral sex. This was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was disgusting. I yelled at him, and I probably should have kept quiet, but I didn't, I couldn't. And he zipped his pants and started running, and she's still down there on her knees looking around thinking, what's going on?
There you go.
It's a sad statement of our society in general, right?
Okay, and no more last questions? Okay, one more last question. Here's John.
A question. Back when we had our 3 kids at home, my wife and I went to it was put on by the Catholic Church. It's 4 nights for 1 month on how to raise teenage kids. And it's put on by the boys' home or deal. It takes care of the teenage boy. And it said, it was full to start with. He said, I'm going to tell you right now that there won't be hardly anybody in here when the 4th class comes, because you're not going to hear what I got to tell you about you and your little jewel. He said, the man should never tell the kid what to do. The man was a hammer.
The lady was a Spike and the kid was a little Jewel. You go straight through to deal with the kid. If you don't, the kid will use you. Never argue with a kid over 30 seconds. And a lot of the, you know, I'll say it right here, a lot of the women didn't want to hear that they weren't the boss. The next class, a third of them was gone. The next class, over half of them was gone. And the next class, it was only like 25% of us there. And because neither the guys or the women didn't want to hear what they had to say about their kids. And said, a kid, by the time they're 2 years old, are 50% set in their ways for getting moral values about themselves. And when they're 7 years old, they're 90% set in their ways and their moral values. And if you haven't got them taken care of then, he said, by the time they're 12, they'll probably be coming to me and I'll be taking care of them. And it was, he said, at the very end, said, if a kid is just totally getting out of control, said, there's a door, but you're not going to live in my house. I can love you out of my house, but you're not going to be that way in my house. And said, you can take and use get the kid to write a letter to you. What they're going to do, said they'll always write it stronger than you will write the letter. Then that gives you a little bit of leeway to work with the kid.
Let me say this, Shirley, real quick. I think it's amazing that for the last 6,000 years, we've been managing to make babies without any problem, without this perversion from perverted people, perverting our children. And I think all of that needs to stop. It comes by nature to learn how to do that.
Those are some of the rural Arizona values that we have, you know? We gotta fight for those. We can't just let Hollywood tell us what's moral anymore.
I'm gonna fight it.
Thank you.
All right, John.